Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of the Method to Our Madness podcast. I'm Stacey Marola, PhD, and I'm here with my co-host Bill Pate.
Hello.
And today we're going to be talking about statistics. I know that gives some people heartburn, but we're gonna talk about it at a high level. Don't worry, don't have your eyes glaze over yet. So
Yeah, I'm curious how many people will actually listen to this one versus others.
I know they'll be like, "Oh my God, no!" Brain explodes. Anyway, so yeah, We're talking at a high level. Don't worry, we're not gonna, be diving too deep into different aspects of central limit theorem or anything like that. So,
Ooh, central limit theorem. Okay, so Stacey, so what kinds of statistics have you seen in evaluation, or maybe what kind of stats do you feel are like typical for like program evaluators?
I feel like the stats for program evaluators tend to be actually pretty descriptive in a lot of cases. And so, I mean, because we're working with people who aren't necessarily experts in statistics, so I think there's a lot of like trying to keep it accessible to the lay public. Also, sometimes it depends on the data that are available. So there's, if you don't have a giant data set, there's only sometimes only so much you can do. So I think the most common ones are descriptive statistics and your basic t-tests and ANOVAs and that sort of stuff.
So you would
Um,
include that in descriptive, or you would include that in like other stuff?
I guess, yeah, all right. I guess it depends on what you're doing. If you're just looking at a comparison between means, two of your two groups or whatever. So you could get more complicated with your ANOVA. That's a good point. You could start doing ANCOVA and gets closer to a regression in that case. So,
No,
uh,
absolutely.
so, but yeah, I think people try and stay. I think that's the one thing that, after graduate school, that was sort of, I don't know if shocking is the right word, but like just a reality check. Because you
Hmm.
come out of graduate school with all these like fancy techniques you could do and all this stuff. And then they're like, oh, for this report, we just want to show some comparisons, like some mean comparisons and put a graph in there. So,
No, absolutely. Yeah. So when I think of descriptive statistics, I think of like even like basic like frequency counts, percentages, and a lot of times that is done with like say like a survey where they've done some survey and they want to get a sense of something, or even like pre-post stuff where they had some kind of an intervention and you look at like subgroup differences maybe where it's
yeah.
like, well, this percentage of like men said this or women said this, or maybe those who experienced the intervention versus those. And we see just kind of like, yeah, and then there's some data visualization, of course, where you have some like graphs where you have like, pie charts. I think those are frowned upon these days, but like
Yeah, I
bar
think
graphs. Yeah, where
they're
where you
gone.
kind of like exactly. Where you're kind of like visualizing, well, what were the differences before, and then how did they change after as a result of the intervention?
Yeah, pie charts have been canceled, I guess.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's really, I think it's hard to justify the use of a pie chart anymore. I think people just fell into the trap of, well, let's see what Excel can do. And then it's like, oh, a pie chart. And it's like, no, please don't.
Yeah, please don't. Please stop.
Yeah, it's just hard to read a pie chart and there are too many colors and you're visually trying to like go around that circle and then you're comparing this slice on this pie chart to this slice to that slice on the pie chart and they're not in the same place and they're confusing. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I was looking at a graph the other day. Not that I want this all to be about data visualization, but I was looking at a graph where I guess they wanted it to be, maybe they thought like just having thing on on a blue scale was like visually appealing or something. But like, how do you tell the difference between like that shade of aquamarine and that shade of teal? I'm like, well, that 50%, like which category is that? So anyway, I want to put in a plug for like more variety in colors if you're making a graph. Anyway, so that
No,
it's a little bit
absolutely.
easier to distinguish between. So,
Yeah, and
um,
I definitely follow some people with the data viz stuff, like Stephanie Evergreen. I think it's like Ann Emery. These are people that
oh
we know
yeah,
that we've met, right?
yeah,
Who do the
yep,
data viz stuff really well.
yeah, totally.
Okay, but like in terms of the actual data, it seems like yeah, you're right. With a lot of evaluation reports that we've seen, especially with like others where they've done, it's kind of limited in terms of the stats. They don't go really into the inferential. Like you said, it's more the descriptive, some data visualization. They're trying to communicate what the impact was, what the change was. And so they have that. And a lot of that even now, it's like automatically generated when somebody completes a survey, right? So like,
Yeah,
yeah, so like in a lot of survey platforms, we've seen that. Qualtrics, Google stuff.
I think
Um,
even SurveyMonkey. I think SurveyMonkey even does
oh
it.
yeah, absolutely. SurveyMonkey is really good with that. I've always hated graphics from SPSS.
Oh yeah,
Even though that's
SPSS.
like what I use most of the time, it's like I use it most of the time, but I don't do the visualization with it. I usually like pull it into something else. And
Yeah, they never really up their game to get the graphics good. Like, I don't know why.
yeah, I mean, like R's done a really good job.
Yeah, R has done a great job
Yeah.
of getting the visualization component in there. Yeah, I don't know why SPSS didn't. Makers of SPSS need to up your game.
Looking at you, IBM. Well, they control it
IBM,
now.
don't come for us, IBM. Just a helpful suggestion.
Okay, so then what about so you mentioned some other more higher level types of stats that you're right. I think typically you so a lot of evaluators have PhDs, it seems, but not
Yeah,
everybody is into statistics, right?
yeah, no, not everyone's into statistics.
Right. So it seems like a lot of people they understand statistics or they understood it enough to get through their core courses, and then they might have used it for their dissertation. But it seems like a lot of them focus on kind of, well, I mean, if we're talking about generalists, then that they can do all aspects of it, but then they pull in specialists for some things, and you and I both benefited from being considered specialists in this area.
Correct, yeah. But yeah, some evaluators are generalists. Some people are, I don't know, prefer I don't know, like there's all the stakeholder engagement and those aspects of it. But yeah, you and I have been more specialized in the statistical analyses component because I love math and so happy to nerd out. But yeah, so a lot of evaluations tend to I've seen a lot of descriptive statistics. And sometimes it's even hard to get people to do like significance tests, even because I don't know, I feel like when I was trained that was just sort of like something you did automatically, when you're looking at between two groups, like doing significance tests, even, for even when you were trying to show frequencies, across the population, just for their differences between men and women, were there differences, between racial categories. But it's not, yeah, like, I don't know, I was on a project, I don't know, I guess it was last year or something, where I was asking, can we do some significance tests and on this? And then it just didn't happen. Because it would have been like a extra, I mean, it just would have been an extra part of code, is what the data analyst was saying. Like it would have been another line of code. I'm like, why don't we just stick the other line of code? But I was not in charge of that evaluation. Otherwise, I would
Oh,
have
okay.
been. Yeah, I was sort of leading the report development. So
Okay.
yeah, so anyway,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I put
it
in a
definitely
plug for
is.
significance tests.
Yeah, absolutely. No, because it is useful. I think if people like really understand it, because you're right. In our training, we've definitely encountered that a lot where you do some hypothesis testing and when you're just comparing two groups, it may appear to be the case that there are differences between groups, but if they actually add that extra line of code where they test for differences, there may not be a difference, even though it appears that there's a difference.
Exactly. So, but yeah, so again, yeah, most statistics have been tend to be on those descriptive levels. But then yeah, you can get more involved like you and I have done, you know,
Uh-huh.
during hierarchical linear modeling and, propensity score matching. And
Uh-huh.
I guess the difference in difference designs are becoming, seeing that more often as well. So yeah, you can, but you need enough data to do all that. So
That's true. Yeah,
yeah,
and that's something that I've definitely encountered where people ask, it's like, oh, well, can we do this? And it's like, well, you can't because you don't have enough observations to really pull that off. And I think that that is where our expertise comes in, where we've had the training and then also just in the practical experience, we've like run those analyses before. And it's like, well, it's not, best practices, for example, to like run a regression with like, say, under 100 observations. And it's like,
yeah,
yeah, that's not going to work.
that's
Um,
not gonna work. Not gonna work, folks.
yeah, and so we're aware of like what are I think of them as boundary conditions where you can do this. And then sometimes they'll ask and it's like, well, can we do this? And it's like, well, maybe. Or I guess the classic consultant response, it depends. And so then we actually have to look at the data and we do some like preliminary analyses to determine is it suitable for, X type of evaluation. And we could even do some power testing and say, well, you only have 200 observations, but with the power analysis I did, you would need like 600. So if you can get to that point,
Yeah,
then we can do this. But unless you get there, we can't.
yeah,
So
yeah.
have Yeah. So have you had people ask for like really bizarre things or, you have something and they ask for something just kind of out of the blue or way out of the box and you're like, no, I can't do that, but maybe this? I guess it depends on what your goal is here.
Um, yeah, yeah. I think I had a case where I had set up like a really good, like I had done matching at the district level because that's where because the intervention had been assigned by districts. And then, and then we did the propensity score matching at the district level and then did hierarchical linear modeling within that. And so, but then, and this gets back to like the Warwick's clearinghouse standards or something, they wanted matching at the student level, but I'm like, well, oh no, trying to remember. Anyway, it sort of ended up like, oh, can we do bootstrapping?
Oh,
Like
because they
that.
didn't have enough data.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
And I'm like, I don't know about this. It
right.
depends. I think that might have been one of the weirder situations. Yeah. So I don't know. We did kind of do the bootstrapping, but yeah, it was a really strange situation.
It was strange.
So,
Okay. So did that end up being just like a report that ended up like on a shelf or something, or did it turn into like presentations, publications? Do you remember?
yeah, actually, yeah, the initial version with the matching at the district level, that actually, yeah, I presented that at ARA. Actually, that one won an award at the ARA. That was my outstanding publication, one of my outstanding publication awards.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, the bootstrapping version kind of ended up on a shelf.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, because anyway, so sometimes you don't.
Sometimes
So
you win
yeah,
some, sometimes
sometimes you win some, sometimes you don't.
yeah, it's definitely interesting. Like, I think propensity score matching was one of those things where I can't even remember if I had any real training in it because I feel like it was one of those things that became more popular after I was in school. But it makes sense in terms of an approach to running analyses. And so it was something that I picked up, and I think it was for a project. And so I really, jumped into it and was figuring it out and made it work. And then I think it's one of those situations where it's like, okay, I've got enough understanding of statistics and methods and things to test something out, to try it out, and then do some checks to make sure that, it was done appropriately in terms
Mhm.
of, I had enough responses or, confidence intervals look right or, you know, other ways of, determining whether or not it was an appropriate approach. And then when you get the output, then being able to understand it at a level where you can like logically test it out or determine that it did do what you wanted it to do. And you can describe it well in a report, not only the justification, the rationale, but then defending the output.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of our experience and training puts us in a position to really make use of those techniques when we determine that it's appropriate because we can do all that. It's not that because I think a lot of people can go, okay, well, let me go up into the menu here and hit regression. And yeah, I guess this is my dependent and here are my
Yeah,
independents, and they just
exactly.
run it because they'll get something,
You'll get something.
but then do they understand it? Is it
Yeah.
correct?
Is
Does
it
it
correct?
Yeah, and does it support what they set out to do? And then can they explain it in a
Yeah.
meaningful way?
Yeah, the understanding component and understanding your coefficients is an important component of all this. Like you could put a bunch of stuff into your analyses and then like you can't interpret it. That happened, I mean, this was years ago when I was in graduate school, but there was someone that came in for a job talk, had put all this stuff in their regression, and then they couldn't someone asked like, well, what does that mean, that coefficient?
Yeah.
And they couldn't explain it. So they didn't get that job.
Yeah.
I remember my advisor was like, well, you can explain your coefficient, Stacy, so you're doing better than that
Right.
job talk we just saw. Yeah. So, yeah, that's a very, very important part of your analyses, being able to explain it and explain it in terms that people will understand. So,
Absolutely. And so that's what I really like about whenever we have the opportunity to present findings from things. You don't want to bore people to death. You want to be able to get quickly to, what the main finding is and why.
yeah.
And then in a lot of reports, I guess you have that, straightforward explanation, like in the executive summary. And then you're just really clear in like your methods, results, and then implications. But then when we want to communicate to other people who understand, there's a more technical version of it in like an appendix.
Yeah, exactly. So the
Yeah.
people that want to nerd out on all the statistics can go in there.
Yep.
But I think that brings up a good point of, the interpretability and the explaining to lay audiences, like that's how you get into sort of effect sizes where, people want to know, well, was this a large effect? Was it a small effect? And so, and can you compare across different analyses and studies, like to see, what is the combined effect of this program? Like that's more of a meta-analysis, but you need this sort
Mhm.
of standardized measure, which is an effect size. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, effect sizes. I remember, oh, you probably remember this too, when the American Evaluation Association, they had a listserv
oh
and
yeah,
it was like pretty active. And there were some, people who were, particularly active. And then it disappeared for a while and then it popped back up. But before it disappeared that first time, there was something that came out. I think it was in an issue of like the American Statistical Association where they're talking about getting away from null hypothesis testing and how
oh
like the
yeah,
p-value had been like abused. And it's totally
right.
true. It
It's true.
had been abused. And so, and talking about how we need to get away from that. And then, like, there was a bunch of discussion on the listserv, and, people were like losing their minds. Like, people were trying to defend it. And it's like, well, it's useful if you do it in this way. And, others
Yeah,
are, it's like, no, we should just banish it completely. And it's like, well, but then, of course, it's like, okay, so let's go beyond p-values and let's talk about effect sizes. And I think that became, I don't know, it became more prominent, more appreciated in research where you do the hypothesis testing, of course, but then you talk about effect sizes and you talk
yeah,
about impact.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then I'm sure there's like the ongoing debate, I guess, about, what's a big effect, what's a small effect. I mean, John Cohen in his, seminal book had sort of outlined a few, but even in that book, he was like, well, this is just an example, but then, it kind of
It
became
became the standard.
the standard. Oh man.
Yeah, as
Uh,
much as he didn't want it to become the standard, it
it
became the
became the
standard.
standard. So, but yeah, no, it does provide, a useful way of talking about results in a manner that maybe makes a little more sense to folks, and as a way of like standardizing your results. And then, yeah, if you wanted to do a meta-analysis, you could. A meta-analysis, for people that don't know, is like you can look at the results like for a program. It's, let's say there's one program and they've done like 5 studies, and so you
Mhm.
can look, create, effect sizes for each of those 5 studies, and then sort of analyze those effect sizes to see, okay, does this program have an effect across these, in these different situations? And so, but yeah, and there are ways to calculate effect sizes, not just, using means and standard deviations, which I think is the typical one. Like you can convert, there are ways, like meta-analysis folks have ways of like converting regression coefficients into effect sizes, and
Mhm.
so you can have a standardized measure that you can analyze across all these different studies. So anyway, that was a little
Yeah.
bit of a meta-analysis rabbit hole, but so, but yeah, it's useful for talking about information, and having a standardized measure. Because yeah, if you have, I don't know, a frequency over here and a regression coefficient over here, how do you know if it in both these studies, was there an effect? Did the program, cause improvements or not? How does that?
Mhm.
So anyway, good to have a good standardized measure.
Absolutely. And
So,
then have you had a lot of opportunity to run regressions in evaluations, or is that not common because there aren't a lot of situations that warrant it?
I haven't, yeah, I haven't used it as much as I always thought. Well, okay, and some of the, I'm not sure if it's not the situations don't warrant it, or it's because you've got, a lot of folks from psychology in the field. It seems like each of the social scientists science fields have their favorite approach. So when I was in graduate school for sociology, regression was the thing. So we learned all the regression types,
Hmm.
ordinary least squared. We learned the logistic regression, Tobit, Probit, all this
Hmm.
good stuff. So but I think psychologists tend to do more with ANOVA and ANCOVA
Yes, yes. ANOVA
and
is definitely more popular with psychologists. That was like one of the first things that I got into, but it was because of the setup that we had where we were doing experimental research with
yeah.
like memory, and we were looking at like three different age bands. And so that kind of lent itself naturally to running analysis of variance.
Yeah. So yeah, and I think with experimental design, yeah, you tend to run ANOVAs. But you could do quite a bit with regressions.
Hmm.
I love regression. But yeah, I think I've used it more in my like some independent research. You get a I've done stuff where because you can't always, publish stuff that you're working on for an evaluation, but if you get some secondary data, you can, do some analyses and then have a little pub.
Yeah.
So I've done stuff in there. I've also done like survival analysis.
Hmm.
Survival analysis, which is also called event history analysis, which is also called, I think, failure analysis and engineering. So,
Yeah,
how
it's very
much,
popular. Yeah.
yeah. And survival analysis actually comes from people survive, like it's basically based
Like
on
literally.
literally based on what's your chances of surviving for a certain amount of time after a treatment.
Yeah, especially with like, yeah, with like different like medical research
Yeah.
or longitudinal work looking at over time, multiple measures over time.
Yeah. So I use that, and that's based on principle like logistic regression. But anyway, yeah, I use that to do some stuff on dropout, analyzing, you know, dropout prevention. So I was able to use that for got some secondary data, and that was longitudinal and was able to look at different patterns and dropout from high school. And then
Yeah.
we did one for college too. So yeah, so I've tried to work sort of more regression techniques into some of my other work, but I
Hmm.
haven't always gotten to do it for in the evaluation work that we've done. Not because you couldn't, I guess, just did. Weird. Well, you need enough cases, but I think there's a preference for ANOVAs and that sort of thing. Goes back to
Yeah. Yeah, it's
yeah,
definitely interesting. Yeah, my background is psych and your background is sociology. Francis's background is also sociology. And I remember back when we first got together, she was like working on her dissertation and I hadn't done my master's yet. So after she did her PhD, I did my master's. But we had these like two libraries of statistics books, right? So I
yeah.
had like my psychology stuff, she had her sociology stuff. And like when we moved in together, we like put them all like on the same bookshelves. And there was very little overlap. There was only one title that we both had in common. It was funny.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting. And so like when we started our company back in 2010, it was really useful because we had these different perspectives. I was more comfortable with like it was almost like we were like, two tradespeople and like we
Yep,
both had like our toolkits and like well, I have these tools, she has these tools, and we can get this
exactly.
done.
We can
Yeah.
get this done. Yeah, even though it's a little bit of another rabbit hole, but like even though, ANOVA and regression and they're all part of the generalized linear model, like they're all related.
That's a
Going
secret.
back.
Shh.
But
No,
yeah,
but you're absolutely right. Yeah, it's true. And it's like I think it was like after I took like a bunch of courses and it got to that point and it's like oh my, oh my God, they're all this,
It's
it's
all
all
the
the same
same.
thing. You just look at it differently, or it's like, well, if you have these things, then, well, this version of the GLM, then it becomes ANOVA
Exactly. Then it becomes
instead of
ANOVA.
like regression or
Regression.
tests.
Yeah. It's just all one big happy family, folks. Stop it with the stats wars. Oh
Yeah, I
man.
think I think the weirdest thing that somebody asked me to do was they wanted to bring in item response theory,
Oh wow.
IRT
Wow.
analysis, and I'm like, okay, I understand IRT. Let me bring in somebody.
Yeah.
And it's funny. This is when I actually turned to John Hitchcock,
Oh wow.
and I'm like, hey, so do you have somebody who can like help me with this? And he had like a grad student who
Oh
was like
awesome.
doing stuff, and then so then this was with a particular client, and so I arranged a meeting, and I had them like so I updated Hitchcock's guy about what they were wanting to do. And it's like, okay. And then I gave them an example, and so they had a sense of it. And so they worked up a little proposal and they pitched it to the client. And I think what blew their mind was how involved it is and
It's
how
very
much time
involved.
exactly and how much time it would take. And it's like it's going to cost this. And it was like it was a really big number. And it kind of like scared them off. And it's like they had the ability to do it. There was budget, and I think there was like a little bit of work done, like kind of like a phase one kind of thing. But then after that experience, I think the client was like, "Oh, we can just do this ourselves now." And I'm like, "Can you though? I don't know
Can
if you
you though?
have the expert." It's like I'm
You
not
don't have
going to
the
tell you what
expertise.
not to do, but I wouldn't recommend that. And so I think they abandoned that after some time because they didn't do anything.
Yeah.
There wasn't any kind of a publication, I guess, or kind of like an end report where they're able to show how they, took on that approach. But yeah, it's definitely interesting how much stuff we do or attempt to do that doesn't make like the final report, but
Oh
we know
yeah.
that we did it, kind of
We
like
know that we
behind the
did it.
scenes.
Yeah. That's the thing. Like every like that little results line, in the report, the amount of work that goes into getting to that point, I think a lot of people don't understand.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah, especially if
and
you want to do it right.
if you want to do it right, yeah, people don't understand. And I don't know if it's because, people do see that, oh, I could just click this thing on here and, get a
Mhm.
result or, go on Excel and just, click this thing and, get some result. Or if it's just, just not really understanding the statistics. But people think it could be done, like just, oh, that shouldn't take that long, right? If you want to do it right, it takes a while.
Absolutely, yeah. So we've both seen stuff where things that end up in a report, and it's like, okay, well, that's interesting, I guess, or we see it in a report and it's like, well, it's part of the gray literature. It's not peer reviewed, so, you know, whoever writes the report or whoever is ultimately responsible for the report, makes some kind of a decision. And
Yeah.
I think as like, especially as like independent consultants or hired guns to do a specific thing, we explain it's like, okay, so here's what I did, and here's what I found, and here's what I think you can say. And then they take it. And I think most of the time they'll, preserve all of our like caveats and explanations and clarifications. Sometimes they don't. And so then
Yeah.
we like push back. But it ends up in the gray literature. So I'm sure that there's a lot of stuff out there where it's like, well, that's not quite right. But there
Yep.
wasn't any kind of a peer review process to, say that. Uh,
Exactly.
yeah.
So,
And so that's why we like when we do have stuff published or presented, especially in venues where there is peer review and it is rigorous. And like, like you indicated in your presentation at AERA,
Yeah.
it got an award because it was recognized by your peers as being the appropriate thing and done well, but also, I'm assuming, like explained well.
Yeah, it was explained very well.
Okay. Yeah.
Clear, clear presentation. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So people love it when we're able to translate that into outcomes that you're right, different stakeholders at different levels can all understand.
All right. So, hey, folks. So I think we're at time now. I think we might have gone a little bit over. So I don't know. Like we've covered a lot today, and if there's anything, maybe we get feedback from folks about, what you'd like us to cover next, like go into more depth, because we can. All these topics could be a whole podcast or
On
multiple
its own.
podcast
Yeah.
episodes about.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's so much to cover in stat. Yeah, I like that.
Cool. Okay. Well, so you can reach us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Blue Sky, Instagram. Is that it? I think that's it. Or I guess you can like email us at our individual companies. But so, so let us know if you want us to dive into one of these topics more, or eventually we'll just pick one. Go to work.
Don't make me pick one.
Don't make us pick one.